what do you think is your biggest mistake maybe at TapChief?
I don't believe in regrets, man, in general.
Oh,
So
yeah. Okay. That's the best answer that you could have given.
I fundamentally believe that. A lot of
Yeah.
times it sounds like a good answer, but I think that every decision, good or bad, at any point in time, has led us to where we are.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Bits and Pieces podcast. If this is your first episode, this is a platform where we sit down with society's exceptions, entrepreneurs, celebrities, business people, people who are living lives that are completely different from normal people. And today I have with me a really special guest. He is a young entrepreneur who sold his first startup while he was in college. He is the CEO of TapChief, a company that LinkedIn rated as one of India's top 3 startups of 2019. Shashank Murali, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks, Noah. Good to be here.
Yeah. So before we get into it, before we talk about your startups, I want to know, what are you thinking about when you're not thinking about TapChief?
I think, before it used to be still different. I think these days it's a lot about what's happening with the world, right? What's going on with COVID? How is it going to change? So many things. I think some behaviors are fundamentally going to change. So yeah, I do try and spend some time reading and also wondering about what other people are saying, what different sets of people are saying about how different aspects of life in itself, everything from transportation to mobility to healthcare to education, the way people work, which is of course of deep interest to me personally.
Mm.
So I think a lot of things are changing in the world. So right now, honestly, trying to come to terms and also understand, and hopefully try and imagine a few pieces. Aside from that, in a pre-COVID time, I think I used to spend, honestly, although I'm not very vocal about it, but I used to spend a lot of time, both of looking at a lot of what's happening from a political stance across the
Mm.
world, not just in our country.
Right.
And last but not the least, cricket. Cricket continues to be a very you know good
Yeah.
part of life in the world.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, of course, it's not happening anymore. But yeah.
Right. Do you think any of the things that you spoke about, like work or school, will never go back to being the same?
Well, I think it is tough, right? Because at least from what most experts say, the world will not be free of COVID for a good 12 to 18 months, right?
Right.
12 to 18 months is an incredibly long
Yeah,
time.
that's yeah.
So, so keeping that in mind, yes, I do believe that some things are going to be irreversible, right? Uh, I'm not sure what those are. I leave those to the experts, but I think at least from a work standpoint, I can say very safely that every business and every company will like to have a certain portion of their workforce being completely remote, just from a business continuity standpoint, so that if at all, and God forbid that we have to encounter such a situation again or any other situation, businesses are far more prepared, right? So far, a lot of legacy organizations and industries never thought that that is of essence. And in fact, I've had a lot of time, I've gone ahead and tried to convince very senior executives at very large businesses that it is going to be essential. So today, I think that has accelerated. Same with learning. I think even you guys are having some of your classes online.
Online. Yeah.
Uh, that's happening even with kids as young as 5 years old, 6 years old, right? So yes, so some of those are going to change fundamentally. I think concepts like flip learning will start applying to work as well, where people will do a lot of deep focused work, by themselves,
Right.
and go to office only to collaborate and actually engage in things which involve other people.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't think the value of in-person collaboration will go away, or in-person teaching or any of that will go away. but at the same time, it'll be very, very focused. I think it'll be valued very highly. That time will be very valued very highly when as compared to what it used to be pre-COVID.
Right. Okay, let's get into it then. Before we get into TapChief, I'm sure you get asked about TapChief a lot, but I want to talk about your first startup, Advice.
Right.
What was that like? How did you come to selling your first startup while you were in college? Tell me the whole story.
Well, so I think, as you're aware, obviously, right? At least in our times, BITS never had attendance. So I spent a lot of time outside the classroom.
Yeah, it still doesn't.
First few, yeah, I'm sure, and I think that's how it should always be.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, so first few years spent a lot of time outside classroom, uh, doing random stuff, picking up and trying out all sorts of things as part of the press club, as part of sounds, as part of a bunch of pretty cool stuff, which was quite interesting. But of course, after a period of time in which everything gets boring, right?
Hmm.
So that's when you try and hunker down and try to figure out your own specialty of sorts. So that's when I think in my second year is that's when MOOCs had started to just come out and get started to launch. So yeah, I think Udacity back then had just two courses. One was Intro to Computer Science, and the other was Intro to Web Development, something like that. So, so yeah, I started off with the Intro to Computer Science course where they very interestingly taught Python while teaching you how to build a search engine. So I found that journey very interesting. Where I landed up finishing that entire course in like I think 2 days flat or something, and just got around to trying to build stuff out with Python. And Python is almost like writing English. It's one of the most simpler computer programming languages.
Right.
So yeah, that's how I picked up coding, started freelancing, built some sites for internal campus use, did a lot of stuff. That's what funded a lot of debauchery and partying in college for the next couple of years. Eventually, my co-founder and I, Binay and I and Arjun, also all of our siblings, were preparing for their own JEE, right,
Right.
around that. And quite often they used to reach out and say, hey, can you help me with this? Can you solve that doubt, etc., etc. And we were obviously not very keen to do so when you were in fourth year of college, third year of college. But we thought that was quite an interesting opportunity for us to build out something, at least build a simple app which kids could use to pose their doubts. And we saw on campus a lot of our peers were kind of tutoring, etc., on Chegg, on I think it used to be called Insta.edu at that point, and a few other things, right? So we thought, we know that we have a good base of tutors for sure, and kids would probably definitely need it post 5 p.m. once classes are done and they're stuck. So we thought, why not? Let's go ahead and build something out, right? Just for fun. So in all honesty, we built it for fun as like a fun project, right? We never
Okay.
thought we would try to make a startup out of it or anything of that sort. Uh, so yeah, so that's how we began in 2014. We ran that for about a year. We had like I think 500 plus tutors, a bunch of thousands of students. So yeah, so it was pretty cool what we were able to do at that time, and to see that happening on a real time basis every day was quite exciting. Now, how did the sale exactly happen? As I said, we were not trying to build that out as a startup.
Right.
In fact, we not even had a company registered, to be very honest. But another company, kind of, a bunch of very impressive founders reached out to us, saying how much they enjoyed looking at our technology, our supply base, etc., and said, hey, would you be interested in kind of selling the company? So that's when we said, okay, why not? Let's go ahead and sell it. At least it will have a great home. Because at least we thought that the product should definitely decide and continue to thrive. But we didn't know if we were the best ones to run it. So when we saw somebody with a lot more excitement than us, we thought it would be the logical conclusion. So yeah, that's how it happened. And I think at one point we just said, worst case, we would have at least have a good story to say that we sold something in college.
Yeah.
So that's how that happened. So in summer of 2015, we sold it at the end of our fourth year. Spent the next 6 months or so shuttling between Bangalore, Pilani, helping that company that acquired us to transition,
Okay.
help them get up to speed, etc., etc. So yes, it was interesting times. Probably taught us a lot about building products, building things, building the first set of team members. So yeah, so it was quite an interesting time in our lives, you can say.
And what's your relationship like with the people in your team? Are y'all, we'll go first with your co-founders and then with the rest of the team. Are y'all friends or are y'all business partners? People who work together.
See, I think, we were obviously friends first and we became co-founders over a period of time. But I think I would say that it was friends, co-founders, best friends. It's that sort of a journey, I would say.
Right.
We have become more closer friends, having seen through a lot of things together,
Hmm.
having been through a lot of tough situations where we had to make very tough decisions, etc., together. So that's obviously deepened that bond and that relationship as friends. But yeah, of course, we continue to work with each other because we respect each other's skills, each other's inputs, and we believe that each one of us brings something extremely unique to the table. Uh, right, and I think that mutual level of respect has to be there, because you can't just be friends and hope for the other things to work out, right? I think
Yeah.
it's pertinent that those unique skills exist, and that mutual love and respect exist for you to be successful co-founders. And aside from that, I mean, I commonly say that at least my barometer has always been, at least in various forums, when people ask me, how do you pick your co-founder, who's a good co-founder, etc. I at least again, have a very simple answer, because you can't give a very right answer for this.
Yeah.
So my simple answer is what I call the beer test, right? So can you have a really really ugly shouting match in a room, and at the end of it, kind of propose to have a beer together, and you go ahead and actually have that beer, right? If
Right.
you cannot do that with a person, please don't go ahead and kind of start a company with them, because you'll run into situations where you're at each other's neck more often than not, than being like all homey and very
Yeah.
chill, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's my take about co-founders, at least.
And with the rest of your employees, are they friends or are they employees? Is how clear is the line between the two?
Well, I think, see, you know, there are two ways to build teams. I feel, one way, at least in the initial days, what do you think is the right way is to build it like a family, right?
Right.
Everybody knows
Yeah.
every aspect of everybody's lives. Anybody can say anything to each other, etc., etc. That still works at like the first 10, 15 people, I think. But once you start scaling, and last year is when we really scaled out our team to like nearly 60 people or so. I think that's when, one needs to start thinking of yourself as a sports team more than anything else, right? Who are extremely professional, who have come together for a cause, and who really want to win, and thereby encourage each other to get and improve themselves, and have no qualms in pointing out flaws and gaps, because the hope is that the other person is coming with great intent, and the hope is that everybody's pushing each other to do better, because ultimately the cause is more important than the individual.
Right.
So I think that's the kind of culture that we have at TapChief, where yes, anybody can point out and tell anybody that they're wrong, right? Just
Hmm.
because I'm CEO, or Vinay or Arjun or our CEO or CTO, etc., doesn't mean that anybody cannot come and say that, hey, Shashank is doing absolute bullshit, right?
Right.
So I think that's the kind of culture we've strived to build. Of course, we are learning as first-time founders ourselves and continue to try and experiment to do better things. But yeah, I think by and large, I would say most of our team members should easily be able to talk to us and tell us, uh, to our face, where we are wrong or where we could improve ourselves as well. So
Cool.
that's the way it is. And when it comes to things outside of work, when it comes to things at a personal level, uh, yeah, I mean, I think we have a fair amount of interaction. We have our sort of parties at different occasions where we all drink together, where we all chill together. So of course, those are all part and parcel of trying and building something together. But yeah, I mean, I would like to say that at least the aspiration is to try to be a very professional sports team
Hmm.
more than a family of sorts.
Right. We didn't talk about TapChief though. So what was that like? You started that in your fourth year of college, as per what I understand. So how do you come up with it? What was the thought? What did you all do about it?
Yeah, so it was in the final year. I mean, basically post the whole transition of advice, etc. So we had two options. The more obvious option, which everybody thought, including parents, and maybe for a while even us thought we would do, was to go sit for placements and get a great job.
Hmm.
Of course, a lot of these things which we had done would have helped us put a great job right on campus. The other option, which nobody considered, but barring the three of us, was to say that, hey, why don't we try and build something all over again, right?
Right.
Because I think we really enjoyed that 1.5 year phase where we were building something. It was used by real users. We could see the real impact we were making in a very, albeit in a very small way. And we said that, that feeling is very contagious.
Hmm.
I don't think we want to lose that feeling
Right.
when we're 21, 22. And and we always look at it also from a risk sort of a mindset as well, right? And the worst risk we saw was that in 6 months' time or a year's time, we would shut down and we would have to go try and get a job. And we all thought that we have reasonable amount of skills, we're reasonably smart to go ahead and get jobs if it really comes to that. But the upside would have been that we could, experience this joy of building something all over again, building a
Right.
real company, building a team alongside, and hopefully raise money, etc., etc. So, so yeah, we said, let's go for the upside. The downside doesn't seem so extreme at this point in time. So that's how we always think about most decisions, even today. Right? We really look at the upside and the downside, and if the downside doesn't look too bad, we always go for the upside. So, so we said, okay, we'll build something, but we had no freaking clue what we are going to go build, right?
Right.
We just told our parents we're not doing placements, we're building something again, and they
Yeah.
all thought, okay, fine, these kids, 6 months, 1 year, they're going to come back and pick up jobs. Yeah, so after that, we wondered, and I think what really hit us home was that we rated our skills okayly, right? Because we had largely picked it off the internet. It was not really formal teaching or coaching
Yeah.
or anything of that sort. But nonetheless, somehow with all of those skills, we had gone ahead and sold something, got real cash in our bank accounts. Uh, so all of that was quite inspiring because up until then, at least conventional wisdom, which you're told, imparted to you as especially South Indian boy, for me at least personally, was go get a great job, go join Infosys, go join
Yeah.
somebody else, etc. Right? So the fact that we could make money without just by using skills, without a real job, was quite fascinating for us. And that's when we said that, hey, why don't we kind of you know, uh, just so many people with so many amazing skills, can we kind of help them do this as well? So that's what led to TapChief, where we said we need to just help people monetize their skills better and hopefully lead those lives better. And and we thought that that's what would make people a lot happier. So we said, let's go ahead and try and do that. So this was a broad, vague idea, and we said, let's go ahead and try and do it. Of course, from then to today, we've evolved a lot. Today, we're a full stack platform which helps freelancers, independent workers, or solopreneurs, like how we like to call it, not only kind of find great opportunities with businesses, but also manage their entire life in a hassle-free manner on our platform using, our different softwares like, for invoicing, for payments, taxes, and so on and so forth, right? So today we have over 125,000 people on our platform. We've done over 30,000 gigs offered by some of the best brands in the country, like the Unilever, Pearson, a lot of also fast growing startups like Paytm, Upgrad, etc. And yeah, we've driven over $2 million in earnings to people. So that feels
Wow.
good in many ways. So yeah, and we continue to go from strength to strength. In fact, both March and April turned out to be some of our best months ever in
Oh,
our lifetime, despite
because
all the
everyone's at
pandemic.
home.
Yeah, everyone's at home. Businesses continue to still need to get stuff done, especially businesses which are
Yeah.
continuing to thrive. It's really hard to kind of onboard new employees or new hires. So yeah, a lot of stuff has been happening on our platform, which, our network of solopreneurs have been helping various businesses stay afloat and, more importantly, grow also in these times.
But did you identify the problem first, or did you decide that you wanted to do something together first?
I think do something together first.
Okay.
That's always been the case. And I still
Right.
feel, even if I were to do any other company ever again, I would always make sure that Vinay and Arjun are by my side and then wonder
Okay.
about what we.
Right. And I've heard about you. I've heard you talk about how you approach investors, and it was quite a unique approach based on anything else I'd ever heard. So could you talk about that?
Yeah, I think, see, there's a little too much of importance in general to fundraising, right?
Okay.
That's probably because a lot of success is attributed to fundraising, a lot of media coverage about startups is around fundraising. So it's natural that everybody speaks a lot about it. But I think what one needs to understand is that ultimately it's like, I think I read a tweet somewhere the other day which said, congratulating somebody on raising money is like congratulating a chef on buying vegetables, right?
Yeah.
So I completely agree with that view, because ultimately capital is just a raw material, right? And
Right.
you use that raw material to hopefully create something which is of incredible value,
Yeah.
which wherein somebody who's taking that risk to invest very early on is, thereby getting a lot of returns.
Hmm.
So I think fundraising, at least over a period of time, as we have kind of grown as founders and have spent more time, that's the view we have also managed to develop. Of course, in the early days, it was a lot more fascinating and everything, like, oh, we're getting funded, etc.
Right.
But I think now, we have kind of normalized and been a little more stoic about it.
Okay.
But just to answer your question more specifically, I think we were very clear even on day one when we thought that we should raise money or etc. More than raising money, I think the thought process was, how do we get great people who know a lot more about building internet businesses to come and support us, right? And the best way to say that they're actually supporting us is by ensuring that they have skin in the game, which is that they're investing some capital. I've taken money as low as 1 lakh rupees as an
Right.
investment,
Right.
right? But the reason being, the 1 lakh mattered far lesser than having that relationship with that person and having them as a eternal cheerleader of sorts for us, right? And for our mission and our journey. So so thereby our fundraising approach always was that, reaching out to people and asking them and telling them about, hey, this is what we're trying to do. What do you think? Can you help us and give us some feedback, tell us what we could do better? How could we be more successful? Basis your experience, what are things we need to look out for, etc., etc. And at some point, the conversation did turn to, thank you so much with all of this. And it was, a lot of those conversations were extremely insightful for first-time founders like us. And then we would, at the end of the conversation, be like, hey, so now that you've already spent an hour or so helping us out, would be great if you can continue to help us out. So can you maybe also chip in with some money, right? So it literally was that sort of a conversation more
Right.
often than not. And then they would say yes, or they would say no, this is not interesting for me, I just thought I'll help, etc. In either way, it was okay. And whoever said yes, we would ask them, hey, okay, do you know anybody else who would be interested? I noticed you're friends with these guys, do you think they would be interested? Can you make us an introduction, etc. And we just literally built organically like that, right? We didn't know anybody in the startup ecosystem, especially
Right.
if you're in Pilani for 5 years. It's very hard for you to know people. So that's how we organically built it out. And I think we tried our best to do it with a lot of grace and humility. And that's what has held us in good stead as well. So yeah, that's, I mean, at least in my mind, it has been as straightforward as that. I wouldn't say it was as simple as that, but it was
Right.
definitely as straightforward as that. Yeah.
And what's the hardest part of your job as CEO? What's the hardest part of it, and what's your favorite part of it?
So I think my hardest part, mhm, I think the hardest part is, continues to be ensuring that focus is there across teams. People are very much aware of their own objectives as well as other teams' objectives and how they're faring at it, inculcating just a culture of measuring everything or as many things as possible. These are all, things which have taken us a good piece of time before we've arrived at ideal solutions, right? It was,
Okay.
obviously tried many things, some worked, some just gloriously failed, etc. So yeah, I would say the hardest part of my job is to keep everything intact, right? Keep everything from co-founders, team members, external stakeholders like investors, larger ecosystem, users, customers, their needs. So
Hmm.
keeping all of that intact and not losing your sanity and ensuring nobody else in your team is losing their sanity and
Right.
continues to be extremely excited about what we're trying to build together. So yeah, I think that's probably the hardest job, right?
Okay.
Of any founder or any CEO, in my opinion.
Right.
What's the favorite aspect of my job? I think the favorite aspect of my job is interacting with customers, is interacting with users as well as my team. I think
Okay.
going ahead and identifying different problems that we can solve and some of the solutions which we conceptualize, etc. And once it starts becoming a success, and our users, customers, or anybody within the team or even outside world, could be a journalist, could be an investor, speaking our own words, which we used to speak maybe 6 months ago or a year ago. Now that it's a success, everybody starts speaking the same language. So
Right.
just that, journey or that, that phase, right? What you were saying 12 months ago is the same thing that somebody else is repeating to you 12 months later. I think that's usually one of my best moments in the journey.
Hmm. Uh, and as a leader in your business, you have to create innovation, right? It's a startup. You're trying to grow. So how do you think you can incentivize innovation? Is a speech enough? Do you have to structure payments so that innovation is rewarded? How do you drive innovation?
Yeah. So of course, incentivizing with compensation and et cetera, are useful, but I don't think that's the way to go. At least for a early stage startup, uh, or even companies down the line, in my opinion, I don't think any you can you can buy out your way through innovation, right?
Okay.
I think uh, firstly, I think it's very important to make sure the team understands why innovation is necessary for an early stage company, right? So for which the team needs to realize what are the dynamics of building a venture-backed startup. Why are we going to prioritize growth over something else, over profitability maybe? Why are we kind of at times building things which require us to burn money, etc., right? So firstly, you need to understand, make sure the team understand what's the game that they're playing in the first place, right?
Hmm.
If they don't know the rules of the game, I don't think they can be a great team in the first place, right? So I think that's first. Then innovation, I think it is foolhardy to think it can come only from the top, right? Or that is the founders, etc. Maybe they can sow those seeds early on in the beginning, but over a period of time, I don't think over 4 5 years or even a decade, any company can sustain on the basis of founders' ideas.
Right.
So what that means is you need to build a culture of innovation in a sense,
Hmm.
and you need what that. And I think a simpler way to say building a culture of innovation is to build a culture of where people are taking decisions on their own and making decisions on a day-to-day basis on their own. Now that's never going to happen if you tell people exactly what to do, right? What you instead need to do is to set objectives and goals to people, set what are the barometers with which we will measure those if we have achieved those objectives or goals or not, and then let people figure out how they will go about achieving those goals, right? And wherever they ask for your help, you step in and help out, or wherever they are stuck, you can kind of maybe try and unblock them. But I think that is the most important thing. If you follow a culture where the founders are telling, okay, go do this XYZ, this team go do ABC, I don't think that's going to fester innovation in any manner or shape.
Right. And what's the hardest decision that you have had to make at TapChief, or the hardest situation you've been faced with?
Many, but hardest would have been, I think in 2017 we were running out of money.
Okay.
So I think we had I think it was like the last week of the month, and we had no salaries to pay because we were almost ran out of money. We were not able to raise. We were in a bit of a tumultuous situation at that time. Um, but we did a very, I don't know, very irrational but a very bold move of saying that let's take on debt at a personal level and give ourselves 6 months to turn this around. And if we don't turn it around, we have the debt, and we can just say that you know we we have an MBA level debt without actually getting an MBA. So so yeah, I think taking a huge debt, just as I think 2017 must be what, yeah, we were 23, 24 years old, taking a huge debt at a personal level, at a time when everything was uncertain. We didn't know if we would survive even 2 months or 3 months down the line, because we didn't know where we were headed, etc. I think that was a tough time in general, because one, there was obviously capital pressure and or financial pressure, and two, there was just so much uncertainty of what we are going to be. Did we get it so wrong? How could we get it so wrong? We have always gotten things right, etc., etc. Right. So all of those mental battles, etc., I think was still hard. But yeah, I think that phase. But yeah, of course, we now that we are speaking here today because we
Yeah.
overcame it, but yeah, that I would put. I
Did
think.
you
I,
did you have a game plan going into those 6 months post taking the debt, or were you going to figure it out?
I mean, yeah, we had a very very bleak sense, you can say, but it's not
Okay.
something where I can claim yes we have to figure it out, right?
Okay.
If we had it figured out, we would have raised money from
Yeah.
a normal equity basis.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a semblance of what we might attempt to do, but would we be successful? Would it work, etc.? We had no clue. But yeah, we managed to turn it around.
What do you think is your biggest mistake, maybe, at TapChief?
I don't believe in regrets, man, in general.
Oh,
So
yeah. Okay. That's the best answer that you could have given.
no, I fundamentally believe that. A lot of
Yeah.
times it sounds like a good answer, but I think that every decision, good or bad, at any point in time, has led us to where we are. So
Right.
and so will it in the future as well. So
Right.
I'm not. Of course, it's good to kind of look back in hindsight and see
Hmm.
what we could have done better.
Hmm.
But I'm not one for characterizing those as mistakes, successes, good decisions, bad decisions, because I think one thing we learned very early on is a lot of times good decisions do not always lead to good outcomes, and bad decisions do not always lead to bad outcomes. At
Right.
times it's reverse, right?
Yeah.
So you need to kind of look at it strictly from a decision standpoint and see and analyze in hindsight that was it a good decision or a bad decision, right? It's like a game of poker ultimately. Are you constantly taking good decisions, and even if then you're losing multiple hands, then just luck didn't work out, right? But you know
Yeah.
that you made good decisions. So yeah, I think that's the way we view it, and hence no real mistakes. I would
Yeah.
I think I would claim one as.
Yeah. So I was watching this other podcast by Tim Ferriss with Kevin Systrom and the Instagram founder, and he was talking about how some of the best companies ever are pivots. Even Instagram was a pivot. It was a checking service, and they found
Right.
that their photo section got the most traction. So they stripped it of everything else, and it was just this thing. And so was TapChief. TapChief wasn't always what it is today. So
Right.
do you think that there's any value in that statement? That do you think there's a reason rather that some of the best startups are pivots?
Yeah, possibly so, right? Because I think a lot of times, initially when you start out, founders have like this ideal idea, and they think that's
Hmm.
how the world will work, and that's how the world will interact with it, etc., and go ahead and build that out. But that's why it's so important to launch as soon as possible, because the moment you give it into the hands of real users, you start noticing that what you thought is so different versus what users
Hmm.
think and perceive as important. And that's when you have no choice but to kind of react to market forces, because ultimately you're still trying to build a business, and
Right.
thereby you make those tweaks and changes in order to adapt to what the market is saying, what your users are saying,
Hmm.
so that you're able to serve their needs in the best possible manner. So so yeah, I think it's inevitable, right? I think the best companies turn out to be that way because the ones who don't address those needs and adapt themselves and change themselves, more often than not, just land up dying or becoming irrelevant. The ones which are considered most successful did that not only at like, so again, the pivot is a big word because it fundamentally changed things, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Could be in the form of a business model or the ideal market, etc. But on a day-to-day basis, I think today things have gone so much easier to test out things so fast that on a day-to-day basis, every copy you're writing, every web page, every mobile screen, every button, everything, right, can be tested so rigorously that you're always constantly editing and constantly changing. So so yeah, I mean, I think it's logical because that's the essence of building a startup, where you're constantly understanding the needs and adapting.
Right. I'll end this with the last two questions. The first one is, are there any books or podcasts that or shows that you'd highly recommend to people?
Right. I recommend, like, I tell my team about three books that I think everybody should read if they're doing a startup. Uh, one, the first book is to understand what is the purpose, right? What is the purpose about doing a startup? And I don't think there's any book or any entrepreneurial journey which explains the concept of purpose better than the Zappo story, which is the book's name is called Delivering Happiness. So yeah, I really recommend that to people either starting up or even already in startup teams, etc. The other book on the same lines, I also recommend Shoe Dog because it's
Okay.
just incredible resilience of Nike and
Right.
its founder for 4 decades and
Yeah.
more. So those are two from a purpose, resilience, etc. standpoints. I recommend Trillion Dollar Coach to everybody who is either managing somebody or being managed by someone, right?
Okay.
Because I think that's a two-way street, and it's so essential in a startup to have that very, very clear and to do it in the right way. And it's obviously written about the best principles of one of Silicon Valley's best coaches, Andy Grove, right? So that's something I again recommend. Sorry, Bill Campbell, my bad. So
Yeah.
that's something I can definitely recommend. And the last thing I recommend is Measure What Matters by John Doerr, because again, anything that matters needs to be measured, in my opinion, in a startup.
Hmm.
Right? If you're not measuring it, you don't really care about it enough today. So yeah, so I think that's the third book. So yeah, from a purpose standpoint, from a just human relationships and interaction standpoint, and last but not the least, logic and math to ensure that you're on the right track. So yeah.
Okay. I'll link all of those. And this is the last question. If you have any advice to give people who want to start companies out of college, or young entrepreneurs, what is it?
Um, I would say don't do it for the fame,
Hmm.
glory, etc. Don't even do it because you think you're going to make a lot of money very quickly. None of that's going to happen, firstly, right?
Yeah.
And even if it does happen, you're going to have uh, all sorts of ups and downs before it comes back again, in my opinion. Do it because you personally feel very passionately for a particular problem. You feel that if that problem were to be solved in the world, there couldn't be anybody more happier than you. Um, there, and you would do anything and go to any extent to solve that problem, right? Uh, so yeah, I mean, I think those have to be the right reasons to start up, in my opinion. Fame, money, etc. Just, I mean, I think there are far easier ways today.
Yeah.
Lots of easier ways to become instantly famous, to make quick money, etc. Right? Uh, so yeah, I think those are my thoughts. So you should really have a love for solving a particular problem and positively impacting a set of users. Uh, and if you actually manage to do that, that's your kind of success, right? If you're able to see that, I think that's when or if you're able to feel that so strongly, that's when you should attempt to start up. And my general advice, otherwise also for people starting up in general, is to kind of do it with at least another person, not two.
Okay.
Anything more than three is a crowd, in my opinion, but at
Right.
least two or three is ideal. because it's a lonely journey. It's not an easy journey,
Right.
and you're more often than not destined to fail. So
Okay.
it's great to have and build it out with people you enjoy working with, uh, because those relationships will last even if the startup doesn't.
Right.
So yeah.
One last thing. So I've been trying to contact Elon Musk. Okay. I was just trying to think of the wildest, the hardest person I could to get on to be a guest on my podcast. So what I've been trying to do is to tweet to him every day, and every day I come up with an ad or a meme or something like that, and I tweet to him. And today is like day 38 or something like that. So
Oh wow.
if you were trying to reach Elon Musk, what would you do?
I would I would really try to find who does Elon Musk respect and try to get to know him first before trying to
Okay.
go to Musk code. That's
Right.
what, as I was saying earlier, even with raising money, even with trying to hire people who are way smarter than me, uh, even with trying to close a customer, that's my traditional route. Always try to find out who do they know, who do they respect, try to get to know them. And if
Right.
that chain seems long enough that, like, let's say Elon Musk knows Larry Page really well,
Yeah.
oh damn, how do I get to know Larry Page? So
Yeah.
I keep kind of breaking that down, and that's when you build that chain, and eventually you'll get there. So as opposed to tweeting to him 38 days straight, I would probably try to rather get to know 38 other people who can eventually get me to Elon Musk.
Right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for doing
Cheers, man.
this.
Anytime.
And cut.